Hello everybody, going to be doing a little live here and we'll get going here in just about 3 minutes. So if you're watching the recorded version, skip 3 minutes in and we'll be off to the races. All right, everybody, thanks for joining. Hope you're having a good weekend, doing a little Sunday afternoon live, and just got back from a camping trip where I did a swing position. So before we get into the rundown here, we're going to be looking at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, OMG, NEO, XMR, and XRP. And I'm going to be focusing a little bit more on the longer term timeframes to start, and then we'll zoom in on everything else just because I feel like the daily videos that I do are more focused on the shorter term, but definitely want to always have the longer term perspective in our minds to know how to interpret the shorter term action. So first I'm going to go over the two trades that I've made over the past 2 days, and then we will go through the rundown of each. And then at the end, I'll see if anybody has any questions. And if you do have any questions, if you want to ask them just in the thread of the live post that I posted in the chat room, that would be wonderful. So to start things off, the two trades that I made, in the last one I did was Ethereum, or the first one I did over the weekend, and this was as I was heading into the woods. Essentially, I was looking to establish a longer term position where I could hold a position over the weekend and expose myself to the potential to see some upside. So we were looking at Litecoin here back on Friday afternoon when we were dumping, and the 5-minute RSI got extremely oversold. We were down here at 20, and at that point we had a lot of time frames that were oversold. The 15-minute time frame was down under 20. That was a big hint. Actually, let's zoom back and make sure we're on the right point here. And looks like I wasn't right there. So zooming out, it was an oversold 15-minute RSI, an oversold 5-minute RSI, and that was just a point. I was only looking for a day trade at that point, and it was a point where I was looking for just 75 cents, I believe I posted. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. Here we go. So it was right here. I was looking for a 75-cent bounce, and I was just looking to lock in a day trade before I went out into the woods because I would be more comfortable all cash. At that point, I had entered really in the upper $57 range. It was on this candlestick when we saw a volume climax, and it was clear there was a battle going on. And what stood out for Litecoin right now, or at that point I should say, was the fact that we had a very big bid support, and it was a strong bid support. And I was looking at the correlation with the other names like Ethereum and Bitcoin, and I wasn't convinced that the bottom was in on those names. But seeing the Litecoin support that we had at this level in the mid $57 range made me a lot more comfortable that even if we did see a bit more continuation down, that Litecoin would hold up better, because at that point it was something like 5,000 LTC, and the biggest ask on LTC at that point was about 1,000. So essentially the bid was 5 times as much as the ask. And it was just sitting there still. You can see how we pretty much leveled out and bounced off of 57.50 a bunch of times. So I made my entry into my position looking for a 75-cent move, and I entered in the upper $57 range. It was my average once I was all scaled in, and it was really in the 57.70s or so. And I would put my stop below this level down here at 57.33, because if that level were to break, that would mean the big bid support at 57.50 would be lost, and then we would lose that support level back there, and that would just mean that the oversold bounce failed short term and that I would want to be cash. But fortunately enough, it did end up playing out, but I didn't get my 75-cent move that I wanted before I had to get going and pack up all my things and head out into the woods. And I knew I wouldn't have internet for over 24 hours, so I just, at that point, we started bouncing a little bit, and I just left my stop loss the same. And I said, okay, worst case scenario, I'll come back and it'll be a small acceptable loss. And best case scenario, I'll come back and be profitable. So by the time I checked back in, which was yesterday afternoon, it was certainly a pleasant surprise, where at that point the price was up in the, let's see, yesterday afternoon, we were looking at the price being around here in the upper or the lower $60 range before continuation. So knew that the trade was successful at that point, and what I was able to do is come in from being out and establish a new higher low support level. So it was actually, we were here when I recognized that the trade was successful, and I came back and we had established a support at 63.58, and that was the stop level I used. And I came back and I said in the chat room, great to be back, placing my stop loss up here now, because we had established at that point 4 hours of consolidation and a higher low, and we were right here already seeing a bit of a bounce off that higher low. So I said, okay, I'm putting my stop loss below this level, because if that breaks, that means we're going to have a lower high and a lower low on the hourly, and we're going to start to get back some of these gains. Fortunately, we bounced from 2 cents above that support level. I always give a little bit of wiggle room below my stop level, so my stop wasn't on 63.58. It was at about 63.49. I'll always go just a little bit below a psychological number. So rather than putting it at 63.55, I would rather go 63.49, just in case there's some bid support on 63.50, that nice round flat number that's going to hold. So I placed my stop loss there, was able to see some further upside, and then at this point I was out to dinner and I wasn't even watching, and came back and saw the same thing. I saw consolidation starting and a leveling out, so I put my stop loss just below $67, because the low here was 67.11, so I put it at 66.95, and then I wasn't able to adjust it or anything, so I was stopped out on this candlestick. But obviously a very successful trade from upper 57s to the upper 66s. So that was a week maker right there, and was able to escape essentially from this big pullback and go into all cash. The trade I made this morning, I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. and was looking at Ethereum, just checking in. That's what I always do. I'll wake up and roll over in bed and just look on my phone, see if there's any opportunities approaching. And there was alerts going off on my phone, but again, whatever dictates life, there are some situations where I don't want my phone going off in the morning and potentially waking up my partner or things like that. So I'm not going to just be jumping up and trading cryptocurrencies at any middle of the night that approaches. So I do adjust whether I'm getting these alerts from the alert system or not. And the alerts were certainly firing off, and I saw in the chat room that everybody was talking about all the oversold alerts that were popping off. But I was fortunate enough to just wake up in time to see this 15-minute volume climax bullish reversal candlestick. So I entered into Ethereum anticipating this, and then entered at 324 was my entry point, and I put a stop loss below the low of 320 and went back to bed and didn't think about it. And again, I'm practicing a bit more with my swing positions rather than just day trading and having to be at the computer. So I let that sit, And then once I was up for good, I saw, okay, we're not really following through yet, but my support is still holding. So I'm going to leave my stop loss where it is and see if this oversold bounce can get some momentum. And then it finally did. And here later this morning, I was scaling out in the low 330s, and I'm completely all cash again as we are now pulling back. And there's a bear break while we're live here on the 15-minute time frame that just occurred. So we are seeing some pullback. But that was just another trade where I locked in a move from 324 to essentially, let's call it a 330 average. So just continuing to lock in those gains from a little bit of a longer term perspective, holding these trades. The last one was, 36 hours maybe, and this one was maybe 4 or 5 hours. So a little bit longer term perspective, and just getting more comfortable doing that as I am going to adjust in terms of how I'm going to be trading the cryptocurrency space from here on out, both day trading and swing trading, depending on the scenarios. So let's now look at all of these names from a weekly perspective and then zooming in. So we're going to start with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin on the weekly time frame. Things right now where we stand, we're pretty much settling in to the breakout. We had the breakout. There was a lot of euphoria, a lot of FOMO, big push up, and now things are settling down, and we're seeing the healthy consolidation that we know follows big time breakout moves. So that's where we currently stand. We can see the weekly time frame for Bitcoin has been a clear, everybody's talking about the bubble back in June, and we start pulling back and everybody's saying, uh-oh, here we go. And then we see higher highs and say, okay, bubble is not in sight right now. Same thing. We pull back hard from 5,000. Everybody says, oh, is that the top? And then we continue to higher highs. So this weekly chart could not be more bullish in the sense that it is continuing to form higher lows. It's building support on the way up, and it is not a bubble. Once we got this higher high here back in July, that told me this is not likely a bubble, because you don't see bubbles after huge bull moves see consolidation for a month and then continuation. And we've seen that now almost 2 times essentially in the amount of consolidation that we've seen, the time frame that it's taken to play out. But if I were looking longer term, I would definitely want these support levels to hold. I would be looking at 35.10 and 29.75. If we break those levels, that is a very significant break in my opinion, because we will no longer have the clear higher low weekly time frame, and pretty much 29.75 is the level for me right now. So we're way above that level, almost 100% higher, and we will consolidate here and form a higher low unless there's some all-out disastrous news, which some people think there might be with this fork coming up, and thinking that there might be a messy situation. That's entirely possible. We'll certainly be protecting ourselves with stop losses, and we know that the fundamentals could at any point give us a big dump, like we've seen plenty of times with China and then Russia or whatever the news is. That's always a risk, so we always need to be protecting these trades. But as of right now, I don't see anything that's going to tell me that this long-term bull trend is changing as we are coming off this recent all-time high. So our new resistance at the all-time high is up at 58.67. It's a strong weekly candlestick. Not really any sign of significant consolidation yet, and I look in at the daily time frame to see that and see that we're just starting to consolidate and not really seeing a whole lot of red flags. This is still very bullish, and the way that this is currently set up, we could break 6,000 in the next week or so. It all depends on whether or not we see any red flags, and right now there are no red flags for these bulls. Red flags would be increasing bear volume, significant bearish candlesticks, a lower high and a lower low, none of which are forming. So if we were going to see a lower high, let's say we pull back and bounce off of 5,200, at that point it's normal healthy consolidation. We see a bull move up and we reject from 5,600, set a lower high, and then we pull back and break that 5,200 low. Then we know weekly consolidation is underway, and it's going to take a bit longer to play out. But as of right now, with this healthy consolidation, we could pull back, bounce off of 5,400, and then see continuation. This is very healthy consolidation, and we're going to always be comparing the volume from bull volume to bear volume. We can see the RSI was overbought, but as we know, that does not mean as much in blue sky breakout. It is coming back down and potentially close to breaking 70 to the downside, which is fine for the bulls. Cool things off, establish a new higher low of support. We need consolidation. Our last support was established at 4,700, and then we ran up to 58.67. So we ran almost $1,200 without establishing any daily support. So that's what we're looking to do right now, and it is currently keeping the bulls in control. We look at the 4-hour time frame, and we can see that we have broken the lower high pattern, so that's a bit of a red flag. I'm looking at this low of 54.72, and because that broke, we then had a lower high and a lower low. So we had the all-time high up here. We came close to breaking it, but we failed to do so. 58.50 was that lower high, and now we have a lower low. But as you can see, we're still right there, and it's not like once that lower low triggered, we saw a dump in terms of stop losses triggering or anything like that. This is a pretty healthy consolidation channel right now, and the the bulls wanting to hold right now, our new support is 54.55. If that were to break, I'm looking down at this consolidation candle, and I'm looking at 52.16. So those are the current 4-hour support levels that I'm watching. And like I said, the bulls are in full control. There are no red flags. Hourly time frame is trying to see an oversold bounce play out, and it is seeing an oversold bounce play out, but there's a clear resistance. And you can see what I'm doing. Every time I zoom into a different time frame, I'm getting more levels. I'm getting more support and more resistance levels that I can be keeping an eye on. If I'm swing trading, I'm not really too concerned with the 5 and 15-minute levels. I'm concerned with the hourly, the 4-hour, and the daily. But you can have a running list here where as you're doing the analysis like I'm doing right now, you're zooming in where I really like using a pen and paper a lot of times because I feel like it just has a better job of connecting our memory to key levels. So if I have a little notepad out here on my desk and I zoom in and I say, okay, I write weekly, and then I write the weekly key support and resistance levels, and I zoom in and I do the daily. And not only do you have those numbers now just in front of you that you can reference at any point, but it also burns it into your memory so you don't even need to reference it. There's a lot of times where I don't even need to look at levels because I know them off the top of my head. And also it's good practice. You're just having a routine, a little bit of homework, so to speak, where you're picking out levels on different time frames. You're watching how these levels come into play and which ones are more important. And I do suggest doing that. So for Bitcoin here, now zooming in on the hourly, I can get a new resistance level. I can see the high of this little bounce attempt was 55.99, 56.02, and 55.98. So a little bit of a triple top right there. I would be watching that resistance on the hourly because the bulls have to get over that if they want this oversold hourly bounce and bullish MACD cross to follow through. And the low of this hourly pullback right now is down at 54.55. That's the current hourly channel that I would be watching in terms of the short-term action to see who is in control. So we just formed a little top, a bearish candlestick on the hourly time frame after a 3-hour, 4-hour bounce, and we're going to be looking for a higher low to form compared to that 54.55 level and watching this range to tighten up, and we'll see how this breaks as we head into tonight. So again, zooming in a bit more for some more details, we can see the 15-minute time frame. A short-term red flag would be a break of this 55.28 level because that would break the higher low pattern on the 15-minute time frame and let us know that we're likely to head back down to the hourly lows. So if I see a key support level on the 15-minute break, I know how it's going to affect the odds of what's going to happen on the hourly, which is going to affect the odds of what's going to happen on the 4-hour, which is going to affect the odds, so on and so forth. You get the idea. So essentially, I'm getting more and more information the more I zoom in, and I'm applying that to the odds of what's going to happen on these longer term positions, where right now on this 15-minute time frame, I can say the odds that the hourly chart is going to be able to set a higher low and a higher high will be fairly decent, will be fairly significantly decreased if we lose this 55.28 level and lose the little 15-minute higher low pattern. So that's something that I would look for my 15-minute analysis to affect the odds of what's going to happen on my hourly analysis. So that's just an example of the way I do things pretty much every day. If I'm checking in on a cryptocurrency, I don't usually start at the weekly. I will look at it, every few days, but I'll look at the daily and then I'll zoom in all the way down and get all of these details that I can. So that is what we're looking at for Bitcoin. It is very healthy at this point, but we're just watching to see how is this oversold bounce going to play out. Can the bulls get a higher low and a higher high and head back into the upper $5,000 range? Checking in on Ethereum, and still watching the correlations between them because we've been seeing correlations shift a bit where the big three have been all going in the same direction. And when it's not going in the same direction, we have Ethereum going one way and we have Bitcoin and Litecoin going the other way, and they're in tandem with each other. So definitely always shifting. If you're interested in the altcoins, which we're going to be looking at in just a moment, you're watching Bitcoin as well. And again, the fact that everything that I just said about Bitcoin being extremely healthy still, you're keeping that in mind. If you're looking to do some altcoin shopping, and if you're looking to do altcoin shopping, I absolutely only suggest either choosing names that have some potentially upcoming news. The only altcoins that I think are going to get attention are ones that have news and hype around them, and ones that are fundamentally very sound and investors are going to be looking to get into. And that's a little bit of a gray area and a bit sketchy because there are so many varying different positions in terms of which fundamentals people really like on these coins. And again, it's the funnel effect of money is gone in this space. So we're not going to see people saying, oh, the big three are running, I need to find some altcoins, and we've only got, 10 altcoins to choose from. We have hundreds of altcoins to choose from. That money is being dispersed, and we're not seeing the same powerful effects in terms of bulls running the price to blue sky breakout and running it very significantly. So we have to keep in mind, again, any ICO or any altcoin that is in blue sky breakout should automatically be put at the top of the bull list, because traders recognize that and they're going to run it. And otherwise, it has to be fundamentally sound, or it has to have hype and news around it. If it has hype and news around it and you're not confident in it fundamentally, your time frame for shorting it or for trading it is much shorter. So here where we stand with Ethereum, I'm still watching this weekly equilibrium pattern. And if this were a stock, I would absolutely be looking for Ethereum to set a lower high in the next week, this week or next week, to stay in this equilibrium pattern. And unless news comes out to change that, that's what I'm going to be looking for to happen, where we have our high, the all-time high, low of the pullback, lower high, higher low, and I would expect another lower high and higher low to play out over the next month as we continue to tighten up in this range. You can see volume is dropping off a bit, and just watching for really the range right now on the weekly chart. If we were to see a break down here of 202.25 cents, that's a big red flag long-term for Ethereum. If we see a bull break of 396.88, I would absolutely assume an all-time high is coming after that. So that would be a clear bull break or a clear bear break. And you can see where we stand right now. We are at 333. So essentially we have $63, $64 to the upside, and we have $130 to the downside. So that tells me we are much more likely to break bullish than bearish, because it would take half as much bullish action than it would bearish action in order to see a break from this channel. But anticipating the equilibrium pattern that I've seen play out thousands of times in every stock and commodity that there is, I would be very cautious of a lower high being set right now on the Ethereum weekly time frame. As far as the daily chart goes, we had a very strong bull break, and it was a really nice laggard play, and there were a lot of people all over that, and a lot of very patient people. So some congrats to you if you stuck to your guns in terms of holding this position, waiting for the bulls to show up, because we saw Bitcoin and Litecoin taking off and Ethereum was doing nothing, and then we saw those profits shift over from those two names that were running into Ethereum, which had not run yet, and it exploded out of nowhere. So we had a lot of people in the chat room definitely of that mindset, and again, congratulations to holding out and staying patient with that trade. So where we stand right now on Ethereum, we've broken a lot of key resistances. I was looking up here at 345. We got up over that level, but not significantly enough to disregard it. So after breaking 345, we do look up to 372 as the next resistance, but the fact that we pulled back only $2 above 345, that tells me, okay, that's not a significant enough break. We need to be watching for the potential that this is going to be a more longer term level that is going to continue to come into play and reject the price. So we're watching 345, 347 range, which we are pulling back from. And again, we're just looking at healthy consolidation. The bulls need to establish a higher low. The last daily higher low that was established was 298.29. And that's because we saw a little bounce. We pulled back, bounced off of 298.29. That's when the bulls showed up and broke out in a big way. So 228, make that 298.29 is our most recent higher low. And then we shot up, $50 above that level. So now we're pulling back and trying to establish a higher low compared to that support. And this long lower wick with this oversold hourly bounce playing out on Ethereum is doing a good job of establishing that higher low right now. So we're going to be watching to see if this low can hold. And that's down at 320. So 320, nice round psychological number, bouncing off of that point. And if we see continuation and a break of 347, I'm looking at 350 psychological, 360, 370, and the next price level would be 371 or 372, I should say. So there is a lot of space to the upside. And you can see in the history of Ethereum on this daily chart, there is not a lot of support left. We have 347, 372, 397, and then 400, 420. So we're looking at about 4 or 5 levels of clear daily resistances, and the bulls are in full control of this daily chart with higher lows and higher highs and seeing follow through. So what we have right now, as we zoom in further, is the 4-hour time frame with the dump, and we just saw that dump in the oversold bounce. It does look like we are setting a lower high, so I'm not seeing any new levels that stand out to me on the 4-hour time frame. So I'm going to quickly zoom into the hourly chart and get some more details. I can see the oversold bounce that we got in on. I did scale out of my position in the low 330s, so I am currently not in this trade. We did make it all the way up to 338.57, so a nice follow through, and now we're pulling back in the hourly time frame. Look at this move right here. I'm looking at a high of 339.34, 339.45. This was the level that I said, okay, we bounced for 4 hours in a row. I'm going to anticipate that we're going to set a lower high. If the scenario had been higher lows and higher highs on this recovery, nice and slow and steady, building support on the way up, that would change my outlook. And I would say, okay, if we're building support and stair-stepping our way up, heading to this resistance of the lower high on the hourly, the odds of breaking it are more likely. The fact that we're coming straight off the bottom, and we did form a little higher low, but 4 big green hours in a row without establishing consolidation and support on the way up, I'm going to say, okay, it's more likely than not we're going to set a lower high, have to pull back and set a higher low, so I'm going to scale out in the low 300s and then wait for that to happen. And that's ending up what's happening right now. We look in on the 15-minute time frame. We see a little bit of a 15-minute volume climax up at that high. It was the highest 15-minute candlestick that we've seen in hours, and we did end up pulling back pretty quickly. In about 30, 45 minutes, we pulled back from 338.57 down to 332.35. So that's about a $6 pullback in that amount of time, maybe a 1.75, 2%. Either way, I just wanted to lock in that oversold bounce trade and wait for things to settle down and take it from there. So we are looking for a higher low to form on this 15-minute. Again, I'm getting more details. I'm looking to see, okay, the higher low on the 15-minute right now, anything above 327.78 is another higher low. So the bulls look good to be able to establish a higher low from where we stand compared to 327.78. And we'll watch for this range to tighten up. We've got the hourly time frame with our lower high pattern still in play. We're going to look for a higher low, and then we'll look for a break later tonight. Litecoin weekly time frame. So Litecoin bulls, big bull volume, great weekend for the bulls here. The one thing I like about Litecoin is for shorter term trading is its moves are a lot more magnified and they last a lot quicker. So we can very easily see a 5% pullback after a big breakout on Litecoin, which is why I do like to lock in my gains a bit more quickly on Litecoin. But the other good thing about Litecoin is, number one, Charlie Lee tweeting is a great potential catalyst for volume and money to show up out of nowhere. And when that happens, it's so thinly traded in the sense comparatively to Ethereum and Bitcoin. There's so fewer coins on the bid and ask that $500,000 in Bitcoin doesn't really do much to the price. $500,000 in Litecoin does a ton to the price. So when money gets concentrated and we see a funnel effect on the Litecoin coin because of news or whatever the reason is, we then have a very significant run up. If you're going to tell me, if you had to bet on Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Litecoin, who's going to go up 25% in one day, I would say it's more likely going to be Litecoin than anybody else because of the scenario in terms of thinly traded. Thinly traded means a lack of shares if you're talking stocks. It means a lack of coins if you're talking cryptocurrency. And it just means that there's not a ton of orders stacked in both directions. And keep that in mind, it does mean both directions. So if we see a huge move up, there's a lack of support, which is why we do see very significant pullbacks after these big moves. So where we stand right now, we had the all-time high with the huge surge, and there's a perfect example. That run-up that we saw where we went, 120+% in 2 weeks was astounding, and it can do that again. It just all depends on the news and the dollar volume coming in. And again, it doesn't take anywhere near as much dollar volume as we see in the other names. So we have our must-hold support is down at 33.56. And in terms of the clear trend with higher lows, like we have on Litecoin, we have on Bitcoin and Ethereum, we don't have that here because we did break a couple support levels, and it was the correlation that's playing with things. The correlation to Bitcoin is having Litecoin break support and then completely turn around and then see bullish action. So we have to keep that in mind. It is almost like Litecoin is in the passenger seat of its own fate, where Bitcoin is in the driver's seat. And I would normally say, okay, we broke this support. That's a pretty bearish signal, the fact that we established support over, almost 2 months and then broke it. But we very quickly just turned right around and went, 80% from there. So clearly it is Bitcoin having a significant impact on that correlation to allow that turnaround after a key support broke. So where we stand right now, our key resistance is the high of this move, 69.59. That $70 psychological level is going to continue to come into play, in my opinion. And zooming in for more details, what's the daily chart look like? That's a clear bearish reversal candlestick on the daily. And after the amount of gains that we've seen over the past 4 days, I would not be surprised at all to see a pullback from here. Our most recent higher low was 55.25. We then ran up $15 more, about 15+%. We need to establish a new higher low. So we are consolidating. Anything above 55.25 is a higher low. And what I like about a potential trade entry in these scenarios, when I'm looking at a bullish uptrend to continue, is waiting for consolidation, getting fairly close to this key support. Let's say we pull back to $57. I can say, okay, I'm going to make a $57 entry because I'm assuming the bulls are going to keep control of this trend. And I'm assuming that they're going to set a higher low on the daily time frame and then see continuation. And if we break that $57 level, I'm going to put my stop loss below 55.25 because if that level were to break, that would mean the higher low pattern on the daily breaks. So when we're setting stop loss levels, we have to position them on places on the chart where it's not just going to break a short-term support. If there's a 15-minute level in here that breaks and it's not going to change the trend, it doesn't really matter much. But if we look on this hourly chart and say, okay, or this daily chart, I should say, and say, if we're going to stay in this uptrend, we have to hold 55.25. And then for that level to break, that's when I want to be out because that says we are no longer in a daily uptrend. So I don't want to have any coins, which is why the closer we can get to 55.25, the better because it's less risk before I would get stopped out. Let's say I'm trying to get in at $60 and then I'm looking for a daily support here and I'm saying, uh-oh, the next clear daily support is down at 55.25. I don't want to risk a $5 drop before I get stopped out. So I'm going to have to put my stop loss above a key support level where we could pull back, stop me out if my stop loss is at 58. We bounce off 57, establish that daily higher low, and then see continuation. So I always want my stop loss to be in a very clear level where if it breaks, it's a significant detriment to the trend that I'm trying to play off of. So zooming in for more details on the 4-hour, I can see we broke the higher low pattern. So as soon as this level of 63.58 broke, that told me, okay, we are seeing weakness. It doesn't mean we're going to dump, but it means that when we do begin to bounce, I will anticipate a lower high to form. Because we have broken the higher lows, I will look for a lower high to form and then potentially a lower low and continue consolidation. We have multiple 4-hour inside bars forming. We're looking at the bearish MACD cross potentially closing in. The RSI has cooled off nicely at this point, but the support we're looking at now that level has broken is our recent low of 62.50. So 62.50 is support. If I want to get resistance, I'm going to zoom into the hourly so it's a nice clear level. The high of the bounce attempt from this move is currently up at 66.20. So 66.20 is the key support or the key resistance that would have to break for the bulls to regain control right now. And you can see we just had a bear break of the hourly inside bar. We're heading back down towards support, 62.80, 62.50, a couple key levels that we are approaching. So we are still in pullback mode. I'm looking at the 15-minute time frame, and I can see we had a higher low pattern that has now broken. So this level of 63.92 breaking was a red flag for the bulls because that lost the higher low pattern on the 15-minute after setting some big upper wicks of profit taking and lower highs. And I just messed up that chart, so let's grab it back real quick because there's something I want to point out as well where I was talking about the bull moves that you can see very quickly here. So the gains, the percentage gains and losses are more magnified in Litecoin. We bounce here from 62.50 up to 66.20. So that is essentially $3.70. That is over a 5% move, and we didn't see as significant an initial bounce in the first hour of this oversold bounce in names like Ethereum as we did on Litecoin. But what stands out to me right now is increasing bear volume. I don't want to be in a Litecoin bullish position now that this 15-minute higher low has broken, and we're looking at that key support. We'll see if it can hold. Perhaps a little double bottom bounce play is in order, but it depends on the RSI levels as we approach this key 62.50 support. So Litecoin not looking as enticing. Right now it is Ethereum that is looking the best, and seeing if we can get a 15-minute higher low, which I would anticipate to happen. And just zooming in on the shorter term time frames, Bitcoin is also in a higher low pattern. Whoop. Right when I say it, there we go. Perfect timing. So potential for a break of that higher low pattern right now. And Ethereum very clearly still a higher low. So on the 15-minute time frame, out of the big three, Ethereum is currently the strongest, and it's also most recently cooling off from the most bullish move. And actually Litecoin's right there as well in terms of the most bullish move. But in terms of the 15-minute, Ethereum is the winner. So that's what we've got on the big three. And now let's look at some of these altcoins. And again, you want to be patient. I absolutely think the number one weight of your decision is in the actual coins chart. Whether you're looking at OMG USD, OMG BTC, whatever it is, that chart itself is the most important for you in terms of your analysis. But you're also keeping an eye on Bitcoin, and you're keeping an eye on the correlation. If the coin that you are interested in has a very clear inverse correlation to Bitcoin, right now Bitcoin, as I said, is still strong. There's no red flags on Bitcoin, so we know that we could very easily see continuation into the $6,000 range, which would likely mean more downside to alts. So I would be patiently waiting until I'm more confident in weakness in Bitcoin and strength in these altcoins if I were looking to be a buyer. And again, I'm always checking the US dollar level, because with Bitcoin so strong, we're going to see very bearish action where, Gollum recently was at GNT BTC was at all-time lows, or the lowest price it had seen in years. Whatever it was extremely bearish. But then you look at GNT USD, the actual dollar value, and it wasn't dumping to lower lows. It was bearish, absolutely, but there was still plenty of support levels. So you have to get the picture as to what's going on with the US dollar as the pairing, just so you're aware, okay, is all this bearish action that we're seeing in the BTC pairing, is that related to the coin itself, or is that related to Bitcoin's strength? And I always want to know just how strong that correlation is and just how significant that weakness is related to Bitcoin, because the more significant the weakness is related to Bitcoin, the stronger the bounce is going to be when Bitcoin does show its own weakness. So looking in here on OMG USD on Bittrex to start it off. And I'm going to look at Bitfinex as well, because this was the most requested from members. And there's some of these charts that I'm going to be showing have a lack of price history because they've more recently added to these exchanges, but there's certainly enough history to be looking at analysis. And if you reach a point where you break to higher highs and there's no previous price history, that's when you want to switch over to a different exchange to be looking at that history. But as of right now, where we stand on all these names I'm about to do, it's enough history to go off of. So checking in on OMG USD Bittrex, we can see that we have a bunch of wicks. And right now the bulls are just trying to establish a higher low, or a new support level after the all-time high. So we pulled back to 659, and then we just pulled back to 649. So it wasn't a very significant break of support, but it tells me that we're not seeing established support level that the bulls are respecting. And by respecting, I mean holding it and trying to see a bounce and change the trend. So zooming in on a bit more details, again, I look at these wicks all over the weekly chart, and I'm not exactly sure what's going on in terms of, higher lows or higher highs. I need to zoom in for more details. So look at the daily chart and see we're in a clear little bit of a downtrend and seeing a clear break of some support. So right now, because we have so much price action in this range, in the upper $6 range, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 daily candles at least bouncing from the upper $6 range. That's when I will use the real bodies of candles. And if it was just a singular price point, I would use the wick. But because we have so much price action in a clear channel of support, that is why I'm going to use this wick. And so I put it at the lowest wick close, or the lowest real body close, and I can see, okay, that has my support line. Look at it acting as resistance, then it's acting as support. We're bouncing off of it a ton of times, and we're still holding it right here. So that's a level I'm watching. I'm also watching a downtrend resistance line, as it looks like we're forming a bit of a descending triangle. And I would put that right there. Need to change it back to a solid line. And you can see that's a descending triangle pattern. This is what I would be watching right now if I were looking at OMG USD Bittrex, because it tells me that we're going to see a break. This is the daily chart. I could say confidently that we are going to see a break within 5 days, because 5 days from now, we're going to be right here and it's going to be extremely tight if we're even still in this pattern at that point, which I wouldn't be betting that we are going to be. But you can see how tight we're getting. The most clear resistance is 1078 from our recent lower high. And if we see a breakdown, we're looking at 649. And if 649 were to break, then I'm looking down at 593. So getting very tight. A trade is approaching on the daily chart. Let's zoom in for some more details. We see the bears have the upper hand on this 4-hour chart. Bulls haven't been able to put together 2 green 4-hour candlesticks in days. That's notable. That tells me the bears have the upper hand. We're closer to breaking support than we are to breaking resistance, and we're looking for the bulls to turn things around on that 4-hour chart. Or here's the hourly. So the hourly is just a clear lower high, lower low pattern. Bulls have to get over 811 to try and turn this hourly trend around to break the lower high pattern. And right now we're not seeing that happen. So we are patiently waiting for either that to happen for a bullish entry or for a breakdown through that support level. Let's now look at OMG USD on Bittrex, because that was suggested as well, very significantly. And let's see if we have the same setup. It's a bit different. Look at this low, 1370, higher low of, that's not the low is 650, higher low of 691. So just comparing right back here, we set a lower low on Bittrex. That's a big difference. We look at OMG here. Let's zoom in to see how different it looks. Daily time frame. Again, there's definitely a lot of price action in the upper $6 range. I've got my support level on the same real body of the candlestick. It's still being touched a bunch as support and resistance. And I've got my downtrend resistance line here. And let's put that there. Descending triangle. Same scenario, though. We are closer to breaking support. The bears have momentum, but we're going to be watching this channel for the next few days for a clear break. We look at the 4-hour time frame. We can see the clear lower highs. No 2 green candlesticks in a row on this pullback. Bears in full control of the 4-hour. On the hourly time frame, close to oversold levels. Bulls have to break 805 to turn the lower high pattern around. We've also got a resistance now at 780. So plenty of resistance levels to pick out. Not as many supports by far. The bears have the upper hand on OMG, but there is still a clear support that the bulls are maintaining. NEOUSD on Bitfinex. Here's the weekly time frame. Again, not a lot of history, but enough to go off of. We have the high, the low, lower high, and now we're pulling back to form a higher low. To look at the daily time frame, I can see a clear break. So this is something where we had the high here of 39.80. We got up to 38.94. We got real close, and we said, okay, can the bulls keep this up? And what a bearish reversal head and shoulders pattern is, all of that is telling you is you're going from a scenario of higher lows and higher highs, and you're shifting to a scenario of lower highs and lower lows. So here is one that stands out clearly with our left shoulder, our head, as we're going from higher lows and higher highs. Then we have our right shoulder, which is our first lower high, and then a lower low breaking the neckline confirms the bearish reversal head and shoulder. So let's declutter this a bit, but we've got our higher low, higher high, higher low. Everything's still just fine. Lower high. Okay, we need to be prepared here because if we break the higher low pattern, we shift from a bull pattern to a bear pattern. And then as soon as we broke the higher low, which is called the neckline of 28.76, that was the bear break. Look at the solid bear volume behind it and a shift in momentum. And the fact that this was coming from a lower high compared to the all-time high on Bitfinex, that is a lower high and then a trend change. So right now the bears are in full control. Support is down at 26.59 and 26.08. These two levels down here. We'll see if the bulls are able to hold them, but if not, we're looking all the way down at 24.38. Bulls really want to hold this level. Looking in, bears in full control, very weak, lower highs and lower lows. We have another descending triangle. So we saw them both on the OMG daily chart. And here's one on the 4-hour time frame. I could draw it this way if I wanted it to be a bit tighter. Use a different starting point. Put it right there. I think I like that one better, a little bit tighter. It's only got 2 trend line touches though, so it's not valid just yet. But you can see this low, 26.59, 26.62, and we're right here, close to a breakdown or a breakout, but right now the momentum favors the bears in both OMG and NEO. With their descending triangles, OMG is on the daily, NEO is on the 4-hour time frame. In order for the bulls to turn it around, looking at the hourly chart, we've got lower highs at 27.59 and 28.40. So fairly similar setup in terms of the bears still in control of both of those names. XMRBTC, this is on Bitfinex. Huge breakout on the weekly, followed by 7 weeks of giving it back. This is why we got to take some profit when we see huge bull moves without support established on the way up, because it's very easy to give all that back. And there has been very little bullish action since that big breakout. So zooming in, I can see our key support, bulls have to hold 0108. And right now we're trying to form a higher low at 0147. So we look at the daily. Very clear bear pattern. Just lower highs and lower lows. We haven't seen a significant bull attempt here the entire time. We've seen 2 green days in a row, but it's just another lower high. So right now I'm looking at resistance of 17.9 and 18.5. Those are the 2 lower highs on the daily time frame most recently, and the bulls have a pretty solid volume bullish reversal candlestick they're trying to play off of. So we have to form a higher low and then break 17.95 for a higher high to try and change this trend and come off of oversold on the daily time frame. We look at the 4-hour chart and we can see that oversold bounce, trying to see things play out, but we're getting a little weak. So I can say if we break this 4-hour higher low of 163, the odds that the daily chart is going to be able to form a higher low and a higher high will decrease because that will lose the 4-hour higher low pattern. So right now the bears still have plenty of momentum here. So pretty much anything that's not the big three is seeing weakness. And we're not confident that we are at the bottom just yet. I need to see more weakness in Bitcoin and more breaks of resistance from these altcoins. So zooming in on the hourly time frame, not a whole lot more to see. Just some clear lower highs on the hourly, looking at 17.38, 17.7, 17.95, with the key support in the short term, 16.3. Checking in on XRP BTC on Bittrex. Here's the weekly time frame, trying to establish a base of support and bounce. We have our low of 3514. Our high of the move was 7349. We then have a higher low of 4 and now a lower high. So we're in a very tight range, looking on the daily, and we're watching things play out. I can see a bear break here occurred. We had all this support. I'm just going to put this line on this nice round psychological number just to see how much support we had down here at the 4-5 range, but we bounced right around here plenty of times. We bounced off of 448, 444, 454, and then a bunch here again, 45, 453, 451. So the fact that we broke that level is a bit of a setback. The bulls are trying to recover, but the bears still have some momentum. I'm looking at resistance of 5.6 and 5.61 on the daily chart, these lower highs and lower lows, now that the bears are taking back over. And again, just not enough convincing bullish action here for me to be comfortable. If that 4-5 level was still holding, it would be a completely different story that we'd still be looking for the bulls to see this oversold bounce chart on the daily time frame play out. But where we stand right now, we don't have that. So bears still in control and still weakness. I'm looking down at the most recent support of 4 and then down to 3.514. And zooming in for 4-hour time frame, we do have a bit of a bounce attempt. So we do have a 4-hour higher low and a higher high from oversold conditions. Let's see if the bulls can continue this and keep it up to try and break the daily lower high pattern, which still has a lot of work to go. So there we see the bulls. They have something going for them. In the short term, XRP out of these 4 names is the strongest on its attempt to bounce, but it was also the most oversold. So this is still just an oversold bounce. And we have to keep that in mind if we still are seeing lower highs and lower lows on longer term time frames, and we see some strength in the shorter term. If it's coming just because of oversold bounces, we can't put too much weight and too much emphasis on the fact that we think bulls are going to turn things around if it is just a result of these oversold bounces, because there's traders like me who are just going to trade these oversold bounces and get out and not be looking to hold for a longer term daily chart bounce to play out. So that's what we got for analysis, and my voice is going on me here. My throat's getting real dry throughout this whole thing, but I appreciate everybody tuning in. I am going to be doing some more live interactions with members, and it's also a great time to ask technical analysis questions. If you have a chart or something that you're not sure why something played out, or where's the support here, or what did I do wrong with my trade, feel free to send those my way. And we can also do a trade review where if you want your trade, like what could I have done differently, and you don't mind me sharing, I don't even have to say whose trade it was, but I'll pull it up here and say, you know, this is how it played out, this is what we could have done differently, this is where we could put our stop loss levels. So essentially having some material to go over rather than just me going over these charts. And it's nice to see which altcoins you want to look at more. But in terms of a little bit more in-depth education, I know there's definitely a lot of information that you can gather from this, but you know, questions on technical analysis, if you want to put those somewhere beforehand and have them ready for days like today when I say, okay, I'm going live in a few hours, and then you could just comment on this thread and say, you know, hey, Dan, could you look at this trade and what could I have done differently? And not sure I'll be able to get to everybody's depending on how many, you know, things we get to, but I'll pick and choose and be able to look at it, and we can definitely all have a learning experience together, because learning from our mistakes is one of the most important things that we can do. And what I'm going to be doing and reviewing over the next week or so is reviewing my swing trades and even the winners. How did it work out? What did I do that made it work out? And how can I keep this up and keep swing trading as a more a steady diet in my trading game plan in the cryptocurrency space? So I appreciate all of you tuning in. And again, next time we do this, Looking like Friday afternoons could be a potential, but I would normally like to schedule a time that we can all look at, but just where I stand with my life and just not wanting to add, a weekend schedule in on things. I'll get plenty of heads up in terms of hours, but having it as a set thing that I need to schedule other things around, I'm just not looking to have that on my weekend plate at the moment. But I'll let you all know plenty of time before the next one, and if you do have technical analysis questions, I'd love to go over those as well as the analysis. So I appreciate you watching. We'll see how these patterns on the big three play out overnight. I'm still, like I said, I'm all cash right now and still looking for trades always. So, and look at that dump on Ethereum. So we lost that 15-minute high or low. It caught up to the other names, and now I'm very glad that I was scaling out in the low 330s because that hourly lower high that we were anticipating certainly did form. So the bears are still strong in this space. Look at Litecoin breaking down to lower lows. So I'm just sitting on my hands right now, not forcing anything today unless we see some more oversold bounces play out. And at this point, I need to see some hourly charts get oversold, which is why I was confident in Ethereum this morning. The hourly RSI was oversold more so than those other names. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you tomorrow.